Nowadays, games like to expand their lore using external means. This means that a lot of the rich world that may exist within a game isn't necessarily detailed in the actual game itself. In fact, the game is often missing a huge chunk of lore that exists within the world. Game companies have started to expand upon a game's lore through comics, articles, cinematics, and even ARGs as of recent years. TF2 is no exception. Throughout the almost 10 years this game has been around, the world has been greatly expanded through the use of comics and hidden update pages. In fact, TF2 launched with basically no story. It was just red and blue fighting against each other for control points and intelligences. Basically, nothing was known about the story behind what everyone was actually doing in the game until they started coming out with comics and updates. Today, we know how Manco got started, why the two teams are fighting, and even why killer robots attack our mercenaries in the early 70s. But even with what's generally known and what was re-established in the Ketchup comic, there's still a lot of detail that got skimmed over that explains more about certain things in the story, or may just be straight up interesting. This is what I'll be tackling. But taking it one step at a time, let's start off today with the man that basically started it all, Zephaniah Mann. Our story with Zephaniah begins in 1822 in the city of Mann upon Thames at Mann Manor, where the beginning of a lot of character stories starts. On a rainy night, Zephaniah and Barnabas Hale are discussing matters dealing with the business that he co-owned, Zephaniah Mann and Sons Quarterly Concern. He's interrupted by a midwife telling him that while his children had been born, his wife died from childbirth. With harsh, unsympathetic words, he simply asks to see his children. He's shown the two babies of Redmond and Blutarch, but when he sees the third, Gray, he's shocked at Gray's ability to speak and tells them to smother him. However, before anything can be done, a great eagle crashes in and kidnaps Gray due to the Great Eagle Scourge of 1822. But that's Gray's story, so let's move on. The next part in this story is where the Ketchup comic actually starts. Yes, all of that wasn't mentioned in the Ketchup comic, but rather in Blood Brothers. While the Ketchup comic is a great general recap, it does again skim over a lot of details. So, fast forward a few decades, and Zephaniah has been convinced by Blutarch and Redmond to buy up most of the land that made up New Mexico. So, now that this wealthy English man owned a fair bit of land in America, he and his sons made a journey to their newly acquired land. Unfortunately, during the journey there, Zephaniah somehow managed to contract every illness known to man and, well, obviously, became deathly ill. To make his matter worse, when they arrived to their new land, they found that it was a barren, useless desert. Not long after arriving in what would later be called the New Mexico Badlands, Zephaniah finally succumbed to all the diseases he had caught. He wrote his last will and testament on his own skin, which was available to read as a hidden image link on the first Scream Fortress, and in his will, he states,
I, Zephaniah Mann, being of sound mind, do hereby vow to haunt the earth as a horrifying poltergeist until such time as I have quenched my all-consuming thirst for vengeance against the world, and especially against my dunder-headed sons. If it takes a brave man to admit he is in error, then surely a man willing to admit both of his sons are stumble-bum mutton-heads is twice as brave. It was they who convinced me to spend the entirety of my sizable fortune purchasing the unedonized westernmost regions, Many tales they did whisper into my too credulous ears, of gravel as far as the eye can see, for any man with a strong back and iron spirit. Long did I dream of transforming these virgin lands and its vast holes into the world's most majestic and profitable pits of gravel. But at last when we arrived, we found only fool's gravel. My nitwit sons had purchased a continent-sized parcel of sand. It is here in this windswept desert hell that I fear I shall breathe my last.
Since moving from my Cambridge escape to the untamed frontier, I contracted putrid fever, Billis fever, blackwater fever, brain fever, spotted fever, inner wound fever as a complication from a serious bout of the superfluous uterus. On a 7 trip to the new world, I contracted the white plague, marasmus, sweating sickness, and the calamitous tumors of the island, pleurisy, membraneous croup, and scarlet rash. During the drought west, I contracted brain itch, stomatitis, and blood poisoning. Since settling in our state, I have contracted flying sickness, walking sickness, stationary sickness, shingles, jaundice, spine, and skull gout. I contracted strain-verse palsy and writing of his last will and testament.
Possessing no paper in this god-forsaken frontier, I have penned this on my own armskin, which has slowed off in quantity since contracting in Petico. To the foul-smelling, uneducated simpletons of the untamed Americas, I leave only this curse. As weapons have caused my downfall, so will I engineer the downfall of any soul who puts one to use near my restless grave. Shoot over my bones, and I shall visit upon you a haunting the likes of which you have never seen. To my dearest maidservant Elizabeth, I leave the rest and residue of my estate, including all deeds, accounts, debts public and private, my tobacco plantation, and what remain of the fortune my addle-pated sons have squandered. Find the gravel that I was unable to find. Honor me by placing it inside a pit. To my faithful Aiden tracker, Barnabas Hale of the Savage Australius, I divest complete control of the man and son's munitions concern. You procured the poppy flowers required for the medicines that gave succor from the pains of my weary-wearing ailments. It has been pleasant to not shriek myself to sleep. To my layabout, brain-defective sons, Bluchark and Redmond, I leave the greatest curse of all, partnership. What land I've purchased in this new world is to be split evenly between you both. You have wasted your lives bickering over nothing, so I leave you dimwit something of consequence over which to lead. Lastly, to my most trusted Elizabeth, I leave the entirety of my miracle grave cache, uncovered with Barnabas during a trip to Terra Australis. My weakling son, Gray, resurfaced last year and has threatened to blackmail me for it. I give the gravel to you and swear to you upon the utmost secrecy in its keeping. God and his angels will have to drag me screaming to heaven. I do not want to die. Damn you all to hell. Zephaniah Mann.
This will explains why the Manco Company doesn't belong to either Blutarch or Redmond, but rather Saxon Hale and his lineage, as well as how the Gravel War started. While at this point Zephaniah had passed away, he didn't move on. Being buried in the area of the Harvest map with his trusty gibbous, he cursed his grave so that anytime any firearms were used near it, he would deliver a haunting unlike any other seen. This explains the ghost wearing that snazzy gibbous that appears during a Harvest event. That's, in fact, the ghost of Zephaniah Mann, who roams around the map scaring the mercenaries into a stunned state. The ghost of Zephaniah also appears on Hell Tower, as he not only watches as his son's corpse are being delivered to Hell, but in a few of the voice lines he also chimes in with a few words to say, such as Gray being his favorite son, which is slightly contradictory to the feelings he felt after his birth, but I guess if your two other sons convinced you to waste money on worthless land, all while causing you to contract every known illness to man, I can see why Gray's his favorite. From that point on in the timeline, we haven't really heard anything from Zephaniah Mann. I mean, the man is dead, so that might explain it. Alright, so that's all for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please tell me down below, and if there's anybody you would like me to cover, please also feel free to say that down below. Anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.